Let's give credit where it's due. These are the historically black colleges and universities that should be ranked in the top 10 across the country, but somehow aren't. Why don't they get the same spotlight? The reasons might surprise you. Number 10. Hampton University. We are going to start with Hampton University. This is not just a respected HBCU. Hampton is the kind of campus that quietly stacks wins, while people outside the culture barely notice. First, Hampton hit Carnegie R2, or High Research Activity, which is not a cute title. It is a national classification tied to research spending and doctoral production. In Hampton's own announcement, the R2 designation is linked to benchmarks like at least $5 million in annual research expenditures and more than 20 research doctorates per year. That's a measurable output. Not only that, Hampton is tied to one of the most unique health science flexes in HBCU life, the Hampton University Proton Cancer Institute, Proton Therapy Institute. Multiple sources describe it as the largest standalone proton treatment center in the U.S., and one Hampton update notes it has helped treat more than 4,000 patients. So why isn't Hampton constantly shouted out like the obvious elite choice? Because Hampton doesn't live in the same media bubble as the usual big-name schools. It's not in DC, not in Atlanta, and it's not constantly trending on TikTok for celebrity moments. Hampton is the classic case of the work is loud, but the marketing is quieter, and rankings and popular lists don't always reward quiet ones. Number 9, Tuskegee University. Next, we have Tuskegee University. Tuskegee is one of those schools where the history is so huge that people forget the present is still impressive. Let's start with the headline program, Tuskegee's College of Veterinary Medicine. Tuskegee states that there are over 127,000 veterinarians in the U.S. About 2% are African American, and of that small group, around 70% graduated from Tuskegee. That is an insane pipeline. Also, it's not just a random stat. Tuskegee emphasizes that it's the first veterinary medical professional program located on the campus of an HBCU, and it's widely described as the only vet program at an HBCU. And then, of course, you have the legacy, Booker T. Washington building the institution, George Washington Carver doing landmark scientific work there, and the Tuskegee Airmen story tied to the broader Tuskegee ecosystem. Even if your audience only knows Tuskegee from a history lesson, the point is simple. This school helped write American history. So why does Tuskegee sometimes get left out of modern top 10 hype lists? 2 reasons. It's in a small-town location, so it doesn't get the constant city-driven spotlight. And second, people treat it like a museum piece. Important in the past instead of recognizing that the school is still producing high-impact graduates, especially in vet med. If a school produces most of the black vets in America, it should not be treated like a side character. Number 8, North Carolina Central University. Next on the list, we have North Carolina Central University. NCCU is in Durham, which means it sits right next to one of the most competitive education and tech ecosystems in the country. And instead of getting swallowed by the noise, NCCU is building its own lane. One of the biggest modern receipts, NCCU announced a first-ever HBCU AI Institute, backed by a $1 million Google.org grant. Then there is the law school. NCCU's School of Law traces its founding to 1939 and was created to expand opportunities for black students pursuing law. That matters because elite isn't only about buildings. It is about the pipeline you create to power. Lawyers shape policy. Judges shape lives. NCCU has been feeding that pipeline for decades. So why isn't NCCU always treated like a top 10 lock? Because it gets overshadowed by nearby institutions in North Carolina that grab the national headlines, and because NCCU's story is less flashy prestige and more about real outcomes and real access, and rankings just reward exclusivity. Number 7, Alabama A&M University. Then there is Alabama A&M University. This university is sitting in Huntsville, a city literally known for aerospace and engineering. That location alone should make you raise an eyebrow, because it means students are not just learning theory. They are near real industry. AMU also secured a $1.2 million NASA grant aimed at expanding opportunities for students historically underrepresented in STEM. That's not small money. So why doesn't Alabama A&M show up in everyone's top 10 hype? Because a lot of public HBCUs get judged on the wrong things. Endowment comparisons, brand polish, and selectivity flexing, instead of the reality that many of these schools are doing heavy lifting with students who didn't start with the same advantages. But AMU is exactly the kind of school where the student wins are real, even if the national spotlight isn't. Number 6, Southern University and A&M College. Then, there is Southern University and A&M College. Southern is a giant in Louisiana HBCU life, and it has a unique system-level story. Southern University and A&M College received Carnegie R2 recognition tied to increased research and doctoral degrees. And the Southern University system straight up states it is the only historically black university system in America. That's a rare institutional setup, and it means Southern is operating a whole, statewide, higher ed ecosystem. So why is Southern not known as much as the famous HBCUs? Honestly, because public perception is often stuck on sports and culture, which Southern absolutely owns, while people ignore the academic infrastructure and research growth happening behind the scenes. It's easier for the internet to talk about a band clip than a research classification, but that doesn't make the research less real. Number 5, Fisk University. Then there is Fisk University. Fisk opened in 1866, right after the Civil War, and it did something bold for that era. It pushed a real liberal arts education when most schools for black students were being forced into narrow training models. Then, in the early 1870s, Fisk was broke, like we might not survive broke. So the school formed a student singing group. That group became the Fisk Jubilee Singers. Their tours raised money that helped build Jubilee Hall, completed in 1876, often described as the South's first permanent building built for the education of black students. And Fisk didn't stop at being historic. In 1953, Fisk received a Phi Beta Kappa chapter, which is a huge academic honor society. And it is constantly mentioned because it was the first Phi Beta Kappa chapter on a predominantly black campus. That's the kind of academic recognition that feels elite, but it doesn't get hyped as it should. So why doesn't Fisk always land in the top 10 conversation? A few reasons. Fisk is small, and small schools don't dominate online lists unless they are constantly trending. Also, Fisk's influence is often framed as historic, like it already did its big thing, and now it's just relaxing. Meanwhile, the truth is, Fisk is still a serious pipeline school, especially for students who want grad school, research, or a tight academic environment. Now imagine that same small school, big results energy, but with a different HBCU. Number 4, Claflin University. Claflin was founded in 1869 and is widely recognized as the oldest HBCU in South Carolina. It is private, it is smaller than the mega HBCUs, and it is built around this idea of, we are not here to play with your potential. One of Claflin's best flexes is how it keeps showing up with strong student outcomes. The university has publicly highlighted an around 80% retention rate, which matters because retention is basically the "are students staying and succeeding" metric. Claflin also points to an alumni giving rate over 40%, which is wild in higher education terms. That usually means alumni actually liked their experience enough to support the school later. So why isn't it constantly name-dropped? Because Claflin is not in a giant city like DC or Atlanta, and it doesn't have the viral sports clip every Saturday machine. It is not chasing internet fame. Speaking of schools that don't chase the spotlight, let's talk about the one that literally started the whole HBCU story. Number 3, Lincoln University. Lincoln is the "how do you not know this" pick. Lincoln received its charter on April 29, 1854, and it's widely recognized as the first degree-granting HBCU in the United States. That means Lincoln is not just part of the HBCU timeline. It is the opening chapter. Then you look at the alumni list, and it gets almost ridiculous. Thurgood Marshall, the first Black U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Lincoln. Langston Hughes. Lincoln. And then it goes international. Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister and President of Ghana, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first President of Nigeria. These are tied to Lincoln. This university is as good as it gets. Now let's switch from first in history to built like a modern research university. Number 2, Clark Atlanta University. Clark Atlanta is in Atlanta, part of the AUC world, and still somehow gets overshadowed by its neighbors. Which is crazy, because CAU has receipts. CAU is classified as Carnegie R2, and in 2025, it publicly announced its renewal of that R2 status. That matters because R2 is based on research spending and doctoral production. And CAU is also often described as one of only 2 private HBCUs with the R2 designation. Then there is the Business Flex. CAU's School of Business has celebrated being ranked among the top 100 undergraduate business programs in the nation by U.S. News for 2025. Top 100 is not top among HBCUs. That's top in America. So why isn't CAU locked into everyone's top 10? Because people associate CAU with the third school in the Atlanta trio, which is unfair. It is also a bigger, more complex university than a small private college, which means it gets judged for things like broad graduation rate averages instead of being credited for what it does extremely well, which is research growth, doctoral programs, and high-value professional pipelines. Okay, last one, and this is the school that deserves way more mainstream hype for one major reason, which is value. Number 1, Winston-Salem State University. Winston-Salem State University was founded on September 28, 1892, by Simon Green Atkins as the Slater Industrial Academy. The origin story is humble in the most real way. 25 students, a one-room building, and 1 instructor. That's a blueprint of building something from almost nothing. Today, WSSU is finally getting recognized. In 2025, WSSU highlighted that Washington Monthly ranked it the #1 HBCU in the Southeast in their Best Bang for the Buck category, basically rewarding schools that deliver strong outcomes for students who don't come from money. So why isn't WSSU always listed in people's top 10? Because some lists are obsessed with prestige signals, like big endowments, famous alumni, and high selectivity. They don't reward schools that are elite at value. WSSU is about access plus outcomes. And that's the kind of excellence that should be celebrated. These were the underrated elite. But now it's time for the real power list. If you want to see the most powerful HBCUs in 2026, watch the next video on your screen. I will see you there.